All right. Well, hey, welcome back to New South Christians. I'm the host, David Fuqua, and we got a great show lined up for today. We are going to pummel this guy right here sitting next to me, partly because I know him, but this is a new year. There's a lot of things going on. We'll still stick to our theme, where obviously we talk about religion. We talk about how much the Bible Belt has changed, which is kind of what gave birth to this whole thing. And it's all about Generation Z, too. There's like 88 million of them. And they're coming strong. They're going to change everything, the politics, the economics. They're going to change, just pretty every aspect of life. So we got a good representative today. So I'm going to let him introduce himself, then we'll go ahead and get started. So go for it.
Okay. My name is Isaac. I am from Nashville, one of the few, I feel like. And I've seen a lot of the stuff change. But yeah, my dad's a pastor. John Hite, so my name is Isaac Hite, forgot my last name. And I've always been in the Christian community around here in this area, so I feel like I have a pretty good grip on it. But yeah, it's definitely changed a lot.
Well, that's pretty cool. Okay, now you went to college, right? Where'd you go?
Yeah, so I went to 2 years at community college at Columbia State.
All right.
Got that Tennessee Promise,
free money.
Lottery money.
Absolutely.
So I did win the lottery. I won the most. And then I went to Lee University in Cleveland, Tennessee for 2 years and got a business degree.
So you got business, or was it marketing, or just
business with an emphasis in marketing?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So what are you wanting to do?
It's a great question. I would love to work for myself, doing marketing for other people, marketing consulting.
So you don't want to work for the man?
I've worked for the man, and it's really not a problem. It's the people that also work for the man that you have to deal with. That's the problem.
Well, the reason why I asked that, because obviously I teach economics here and I know you.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny. I get a lot of students, they always talk about side hustles, which I didn't know what that was.
Yeah.
But it's where you're looking for, you might work for the man 8 to 5, but then you're always trying to incubate ideas to get away from working for the man.
Absolutely.
So side hustles and stuff. And I think that's one of the real cool things that's changed in the economy with your generation is all the statistics show you want to be your own boss.
Yeah.
You want to drive it. You want to take your creative flow and go. It may be the one thing that saves us, to be honest with you.
I may be, hopefully. I did it for 9 months. Like I was just like, that was the only source of income was like me going out there and trying to get customers of like websites and stuff like that. It's hard. It's really hard.
Yeah.
And it really helps if you already know a bunch of people before you go out there. And a lot of people, they were like, I want to be my own boss, but they don't know anybody and their product's not that good and they're not really like responsible enough to like be super disciplined about it. And they fail. And then, or they just, so it takes a lot of work and you have to have a good product and it really helps to know a lot of people.
Well, since we're talking about men, obviously you're young men in this generation. One of the things that I noticed when I did all the research, men in your age group aren't doing well. I mean, they're much more likely to commit suicide, suffer from mental health issues. They also are not going to school at the same rate they used to go. More women have been going to college than men since the early or late 80s. Wow. So it's not just happening, but it's a trend that's been continuing.
Yeah.
A lot of men, when asked questions about dating and other things, that just the traditional roles have gone. They have fewer friends. And when you add all that up, I mean, that's not good. Really not good at all. So what's wrong? What caused this? Because it used to be, it was a male-dominated world. Now all of a sudden it's like every category that's negative, they lead.
Yeah. Well, I mean, since if you're looking at the 80s, what was going on in the 80s? It was the hippie movement, right? And the hippie movement changed a lot of the gender roles. So like a lot of people, the nuclear family was kind of getting disrupted, and there's a lot of women that are going to work, and a lot of women want to be educated, going into work, good paying jobs. And there's a lot of jobs that are typically male dominated, like mechanic work or construction and stuff like that. So it would make sense that there's going to be more males doing those jobs than females, and the females will want to work too, and the mans are not providing because the nuclear family is getting messed up. So that makes sense to me. But for my generation, I think a lot of it's just social media. I think a lot of it is expectations. There's a lot of people like, okay, we want to be quiet, we want to be passive, don't rock the boat too much. And I think that's why people like Andrew Tate go and Donald Trump gets so big is because they rock the boat, and there's so few people rocking the boat, and they get all the attention.
Well, I've had men sitting over here in your age group, and they say, like, if they go out on a date, it's like, the woman sitting across with the equivalent of it's an interview.
Yeah.
And they'll ask you a series of questions.
I've had something like that happen.
How do you answer the LBGTQ?
Yeah.
How do you answer this? How do you answer that? Well, if you give the wrong answer, we're bouncing. I mean, it's like, drop me off, take me to the house.
Absolutely.
It's over.
I've had something like that happen where, like,
oh, seriously?
Yeah. She was like, okay, so we sat down, we were getting something, and she's like, so tell me your testimony. And I was like, oh, okay. And she's like, but let me tell you mine first. And I was like, okay.
All right.
So she told me testimony. I was like, okay. And she's like, no, you tell me yours. I'm like, all right. So I did. And I was like, just a real brief version because it felt really weird. And I was like,
so you're in interview mode?
Yeah, interview mode. And then she's like, okay, we want to do something else? And I was like, yeah, sure. Let's go to the park, throw some Frisbee, do whatever. Yeah. And then we're kind of throwing Frisbee. And she's like, I think I need to go back home. And so it just completely cut it off. I was like,
but you did give the testimony, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
thank
got
God.
that part out of the way. But yeah, she just cut it off.
I just need to go home?
Yeah. Yeah, she's like, I think I need to go home now.
Can I assume we didn't date anymore or go out?
Yeah, didn't really talk to her after that.
Okay. But, I'm sitting here laughing about it because I come from a different generation. But to really be honest with you, it's like, I don't know how honest I should be, like in class. I mean, I look at a lot of the males which used to dominate class.
Yeah.
I mean, dominated discussion. I mean, to the point of arrogance, cockiness, whatever.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, but it was kind of fun. I mean, I guess I was used to it. So economics kind of brings out aggressiveness in people because you're talking about business and ideas. And a lot of the people in there want to own, like you said, they want to own their own business.
Sure.
But I look at what I'm seeing in the classroom, and it's like they've been neutered.
Yeah.
And it's like, trying to get them off the cell phone, and then their answers to things, the way they used to share and the way they share now, it's just so passive. And I thought, did COVID neuter them intellectually and emotionally or whatever?
Do you think it happened after COVID?
I think it was trending that way. I just think COVID put it like on a rocket much faster. And then the other thing was, the women have just grown more and more dominant. They've taken over that traditional business role.
Yeah.
And if you look at my roles, there are a lot more women in class than there ever used to be.
Really?
So it's, I don't know, it's just really changed. It's different. I'm not saying it's good or bad, but we had a person in here, the professor that deals with psychology and stuff, and she does a lot of,
what was her name? Dr.
Yeah, Dr. I can't
Burton.
remember. Yeah, Burton. And she was talking about at MTSU, she was one of 9 counselors that dealt with depression, anxiety. And she said it was predominantly men all the time.
Wow.
And she said it was very sad. She has a son. She said it's really sad.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, to go back to your question, you were asking about anxiety and depression, to get back on that topic.
Okay.
I do think that there is definitely a trend toward it.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably a bunch of different things, but the identity is probably the biggest issue. Like, people just don't know who they are because they're told not to be this, and they're told not to be that, and they're told to be this, and they're falling into like these roles and like the identity that's just not them. And then on top of that, if they don't have any Christian belief, what are they holding on to? I mean, if you're not successful, if you don't have the motivation to get up in the morning, if you're not working in a job that you feel fulfilled in, if you don't have a girlfriend, if you have $100,000 in college debt, everything
and then
stacks.
you come to my class and I'll tell you you're $34 trillion in debt at the get-go, and the burden's going to fall on you.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, okay, great.
There you go.
Where's the hope?
I hate to be laughing, but you're absolutely right. I've had some students go, what's the point?
Yeah.
I mean, this is the first day?
Yeah.
I mean, and we're going down from here.
Oh, yeah. How much has our national debt increased in the past 4 years? Past 8 years?
Absolutely ridiculous. Yeah, it's been crazy. All right, well, let's try. We got to move on to something a little happier, but let's get the women out of the way. We'll talk about we'll talk about the church. What is it? More women are leaving the church now than ever before.
Really? Yeah.
I mean, the statistics are just there, and they were always like the rock of the church. So what's the deal? I mean, when they ask them, it's like a lot of them feel like, that they can be in roles of leadership. Of course, the classic argument is, can women be in leadership, I guess, above men, or as far as that? And a lot of people interpret the Bible as, dividing those roles.
Yeah.
Well, when you got what you just talked about, men, imagine what's happening in the church. It's a reflection of the same thing. And so the women are leaving the church.
Yeah.
So how do you fix that?
Man, I think
change everything, come back. We'll rewrite the Bible
you can
and
look
change
at,
it.
You can look at the Bible and you can say, okay, so what are the male roles? What are the female roles? And of course, there's crossover all the time, absolutely. But Jesus, is a perfect example, and he's a perfect example, I would say, for men and women. But especially men, because he was a man. He didn't show up as a woman. He could have, but because of that, he would have been less respected, not allowed in the synagogue if he was a woman, and he would just had way less respect in that time period. If he was a woman today, maybe it would be different, which is kind of weird to think about.
That is kind of interesting. Nobody's ever brought that up. I kind of like that.
Yeah. But
so Jesus as a female in today's environment.
Well, some people have asked, like, why didn't Jesus come as a female?
Right.
Or he wasn't necessarily male, or he wasn't necessarily female.
Right.
I've heard those kind of things being said before.
Okay.
I have a Bible minor, and they talked a little bit about that.
Okay.
And anyway, but to just break all that down, but Jesus, he's depicted as this guy with flowing hair and almost a dress, a robe, with like, not kind of feminine a little bit,
right?
Or the stereotypical femininity, and
with a beard.
With the beard, of course, probably, most likely, and probably really gross feet.
Yeah, there you go.
But but he wasn't really depicted that. But it talks about he went into the wilderness for 40 days.
Sure.
So much discipline. He stayed up late praying. So much discipline. He was kind to his family, and he was with his family doing carpentry work with his dad until he was like 30 something.
Right.
That is a strong thing to do for he was the firstborn, so he was in charge of helping the family.
Right.
And he also died on the sins and bore our cross. Said that he took all of the sickness upon him before he died. I mean, and knowing that you're going to be put on a cross and like whipped and with the crown of thorns and everything, and you're still willing to go through, that's so much bravery, so much and I think that's what the men, that's the hard part of being a man, is that you have to take on responsibility. You have to be willing to do the hard things. And kind of a caveat is that you're put in a position of leadership, and you're put into these situations where you're telling people what to do. And people see that the good side of that. Oh, well, I want to be able to tell people what to do. I want to be my own boss, and I want to be, rough and tumble. And I want to be professional. And it's the same people I want to be rich. And it's like, well, there's a lot of problems that come with being rich. You have people lost. Like Donald Trump has people suing him every single day.
Oh yeah, he's
constantly in court.
Yeah.
I mean, he has people wanting to kill him. I mean, people literally being shot. I mean, he's got his home raided. All these things, and that just kind of comes with being an influential, rich person.
Right.
And people want to be that, but they don't. They can't. They could not handle it. And I think that's with some the masculinity things. There's good things about masculinity, and it's appealing, but it comes with a lot of bad. And we're seeing that masculinity is only depicted as people who are in leadership, telling people what to do, boisterous, all these things, and that's not real men masculinity.
Well, let's since we're talking about kind of segue into the church, let's go ahead and get that. No, that's perfect. The idea of Jesus coming back as a woman, that's pretty interesting. I have to think about that one for a while. But no, since this show is called New South Christians, we were talking before we started of how many people that have been on this show that are not from the South.
Yeah.
Well, then you start looking at how your generation's changed. Like a lot of young people, when asked why they've left the church, because the breakdown statistics are kind of interesting. Like 1 out of 3 attend church regularly.
Yeah.
1 out of 3 every now and then. 1 out of 3 don't go at all.
Yeah.
And they were talking about how many of them identify as nuns. Like, I'm spiritual, but not religious. Like we've had people on here talk about crystals, manifestation, pagans, all kinds of stuff like that.
Sure.
But then they also have a view of the current church structure, at least the way they feel like a lot of it is, that it doesn't work for them. That, for example, a couple of really intelligent, and what the young lady from Canada, that had been to Bible college. She articulated it best. She said, I don't go to church to have a lecture about God. I want to have an experience. I want to experience God.
Sure.
And a lot of them go to some bigger churches, and they said it's about the pastor. It's about the music. It's about the coffee place out in front. It's about all the social aspects. But I'm sitting here in a crowd of people, and I want to have an experience with God.
Yeah.
Well, what I'm getting is a entertainment time frame, a short sermon, etc., pat on the back, let's hit the road.
Yeah.
And they say that just wasn't what they thought it should be.
Yeah.
And also the view of the church when it comes to social issues, because your generation registers as high on social issues.
Absolutely. Yeah.
LGBTQ issues, issues dealing with George Floyd, that kind of thing where, the officer, had his, knee on him and you can see it on camera. So that just doesn't sit well. So what's the church going to do? Because it's really in bad shape as far as attendance, growth, everything. So where are we going?
Well, I think there's been a trend of churches going to exactly what you're saying. It's a production.
Right.
Fog machines, light shows, fireworks,
fog machines,
fireworks
absolutely.
Inside. I've seen the one church literally have fireworks show inside the building.
I've been to that church. Yes. We'll leave them nameless.
Yeah, we'll leave them nameless. No reason to condemn.
Yeah.
And it's cool and it brings people in, sure.
And they had popcorn.
They got popcorn. They got a coffee shop. They got a bookstore. They got a front desk giving you free treat. All the things. And it's sweet and it's great. And they have a kids ministry. Put all your kids in daycare pretty much and let them. So it's lots of good things. And I think there's a place for that sort of people. But eventually you do get tired of that. It's not a sustainable thing. Right. I think there's probably a lot of turnover in a lot of those churches. Right. But to say that, I think the biggest to go into that point, because churches are getting so big and because they're focusing on all these things, they are losing people. And because they're losing people, the reason for losing the people is they're losing the actual experience, which is what that girl was talking about. Okay. So the real question is, how do you get that experience back into the church? Okay. And you need to allow a place for it. Right. That's the problem. You have churches that have 3 services and they have 2 pastors, and they have a set time limit because they're on live stream, and all these restrictions, and they don't want to speak in tongues because on live stream because they're gonna get chastised, or they don't want to have a prophetic word because they're afraid. Right. And they put all these eyes on these people and these pastors, and they can't do anything. Right. And they're scared because they probably have sin going. I mean, not guaranteed, but there's probably stuff going on in their lives that we've seen a lot of pastors and a lot of big influential televangelist people.
Recently, it's been a steady stream.
They come out. Right. And and they're afraid, well, if I get more eyes on me, then maybe, more people will, that's always lingering in their background. Sure. So it prevents them from doing what God's calling them to do now. Right. And that's why it says, repent because the truth will set you free and all these other things. Right. But anyway, so going back to the experience and providing a place for that, and what does that experience look like? Well, often whenever I feel an experience with the Lord, it's in worship or it's during an altar call after the sermon. Right. I feel the Lord moving in the sermon sometime, absolutely, but I'm never going to be crying during a sermon. Very, very, very rarely. Right. But during worship, there's a way higher chance of that happening. Right. And then during an altar call, if someone's laying hands on you or something, absolutely. Right. I think the altar call is a place for repentance, and that's a lot of what the church is missing. And often when you surrender, when you surrender to the Lord the first time, that's when the Lord really hits you. And I think you have to come to a place of desperate surrender for you to be able to get the experience that you want. Yeah.
Well, the other thing to me is, when you have people, because I've done enough interviews like this, and when we talk about this, is how does the church, navigate? Because, if there is a move of the Spirit, when I've been in a lot of churches where they stop the service, tell you what's happening, go through, don't think this is weird. I mean, it's okay, I'm in the middle of a concert, I'm in the middle of a solo, and I've got to stop, retune the guitar, and then explain to everybody what's going on. Whatever was working in the Spirit is now dead. Yeah. And then the other thing is that I had told you about this. So, I get excited when I think about the Asbury Revival or the 1970s Jesus Revolution movie that came out that depicted that.
I like that movie a lot. It was really good.
I see stuff like that, and I see people sitting here across from me, and I think that's what they would really be drawn to, where it's driven by the Spirit, the Lord.
Absolutely.
And like that Asbury Revival was just, I mean, when you entered that hall, with those thousands of people, I mean, you could just feel the Spirit. And so when people sit here and say, that's what I want out of my church, I'm like, wow, that doesn't happen very often.
It doesn't. Yeah, unfortunately. And I don't hear, this is kind of controversial, but I don't hear a lot of worship people. The point of worship is to bring in the Holy Spirit. Like that is the job.
Right.
Is to prepare a place for the Lord. Like that's what the worship is for, is to let him enter in. And a lot of these worship leaders, they don't, I mean, it talks about in the Bible, it said, invite the Holy Spirit into your home. Invite the Holy Spirit into the place of worship.
Sure.
And these worship leaders aren't doing that at the beginning of the worship. I think whenever you start worship, you need to say, Lord, we come before you and we thank you for this time you blessed us with. We welcome your Holy Spirit into this place before we worship. That's like the minimum requirement for worship. Right. And I think a lot of people are just missing that.
Yeah.
So anyway, but
it's like if you go back and you look at the majority, like identify as nuns. Like I said, I'm spiritual, not religious. So that means I'll go out into the woods for a hike and, talk to the spirit world. I'm not going to go to an organized church, or like you said, many of them have gone to churches and had bad experiences.
Yeah.
And so how do you retrieve those people back? How do you get these others? And so then a lot of people, because this show is built around the discussion of the changing Bible Belt, it's gone. Yeah. I mean, it's like this new wave that's come in has brought a lot of different views with them. Sure. And it's like the young lady from originally Canada, she said, this wasn't the Bible Belt I expected it to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if you get a bunch of transplants that don't really believe in, the Southern gospel, you're going to corrupt it. I mean, that's just, if you put an extremely high overachiever and you're going to put someone who's a really low achiever, you're very rarely going to bring that person up, but you're going to bring down the high achiever.
Okay.
So that's a very possible thing. And if your faith is weak, that's going to happen.
Right.
And, the Bible Belt is, it's a thing. It's not a person.
Right.
And a person needs to have their faith. And it's a combination of people that create the Bible Belt. But if everybody's just, oh yeah, I went to church, I grew up in church. I have a lot of friends that are like, yeah, I'm a Christian. It's like, well, I don't live like one.
I don't attend. I don't.
I go once a month or something.
I go once a month. Well, that's that 1 out of 3 every now and then. 1 out of 3, none at all. 1 out of 3 regularly.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's do this because we're going to run out of time, and I got to make sure we got to talk about politics.
We do that
because I got news for you. Gen Z's up. There's 88 million of you. There's a huge number that is going to be massive in this election, and it's going to be their first big one.
Yeah.
Now, they got a chance to vote in the midterm, but so many others have come on board. So I want to talk about that briefly. I know neither one of us are experts on this because they hadn't voted.
You're way more expert than I am.
Well, they haven't voted yet. So it's like, we can sit here and have a conversation, but a lot of what we say is just what we think what's going to happen. So let me just tell you this. All right, so we got President Trump. I assume it's going to be Kamala Harris, the vice president, based on what's going on. It seems like the sands are shifting constantly.
Wait, I thought Kamala's going to be, she's running as president, right?
Yeah, she's running as president. Okay. But what I'm saying is there's a lot of people arguing that even before the Democratic, convention, that there's some technical rules. That, in other words, everything you see on TV every day, President Trump shot at. Let's see, he's in court all the time.
Joe Biden drops out.
Joe Biden drops out. Joe Biden can't walk down the steps. He can't do the debate, et cetera. Then he decides to drop out. I mean, I can't claim to be an expert. I've never seen anything like this. I knew it was going to be a wild election. I had no idea it was going to be this wild.
There's been 2 Oval Office addresses in the past month, and there hasn't been one since the announcement of the shutdown since COVID.
Exactly.
That should tell you something.
Well, that's what I mean. This is just a weird world that we're in.
Yeah.
So anyway, with all that in mind, one of the things that I ran into the other day that was so cool is a lot of people are trying to predict what you're going to do. So they call them demographers, people that deal with demography, like the number of people. Like we do a census every 10 years.
Okay.
And so when we look at your generation, what do we see? The most diverse, the most white isn't predominant anymore.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah, exactly. You have a lot of immigrants, et cetera. In other words, the whole country's changed. It's like this show. The New South Christians, they're changing. That the old Bible Belt's not here.
Yeah.
We'll just take that on the huge national basis.
Yeah.
And so everybody's kind of, well, how are these people? Wherever these people go is where the election goes. But we don't have any prediction except for a small sample at the midterms. But now we're going to get a big one.
Yeah.
So this demographer is a real famous guy. He was on the Obama campaign, and he put together kind of a picture of who you would need to capture: independents, this group, women who live in the suburbs, women that went to college, men that didn't go to college, men that are unemployed, So he broke it all down and put it together in a way that Obama was able to really...
Your target markets.
Yeah, put it together. Well, now this guy's been hired by Vice President Harris, and who's he talking about? Those Generation Z. You.
Interesting.
And one of the things that came out yesterday, I'd like to get your reaction to, is they were saying since 2016, I guess that's when President Trump was elected the first time, there was X number of baby boomers like me. We were the largest, 76 million of us, but we are dying fast and we are retiring even faster.
Yeah.
And so what's happened is,
getting put in homes.
You have come along, 80-something million, even though you're all not ready to vote yet.
Yeah.
But you're the wave. And this demographer is sitting there looking at it. Since 2016, there's been almost 20 million baby boomers that have died.
Yeah.
But the number of Generation Z that have gone online is over 40 million.
Wow. You say go online?
I'm saying going online for election. I could go vote for the first time.
Yeah.
And every one of the women, not men, but every one of the women I've had on here that I've asked about voting have given very intelligent, articulate answers of how they're going to examine the issues,
That's awesome.
et cetera. Oh, it really heartened me because this is good.
Yeah.
We're supposed to produce educated people to make good choices,
100%.
whatever they are.
Yeah.
When you get men, you get a whole different, I'm like, this is a shaky crowd over here.
Yeah.
So what do you think about your people going to the polls for the first time and determining the outcome? What's important?
I'm a little scared, to be perfectly honest, because
really?
A little bit, because there's so much protesting on college campuses, and there's so much protesting in the streets. And if you go up to these people and you're like, what are you protesting for? They don't know. They have no idea. So if you're going out there and spending your whole day protesting about something you don't really understand, just because all your friends are out there or it's the hot topic, or you're posting, a black square on Instagram just because you want to be a part of the group and you don't really know why you're posting it. You just know all these other people are doing it. And it's like, okay, don't do that. If you're informed, like you're telling me that these women, 100%. I'm so happy that you're looking it up, but don't get all of your information from reels on Instagram.
Oh, absolutely.
Don't just because your favorite influencer, Kim Kardashian or whoever, is recommending a candidate, all these different things. Just because people don't be influenced by idiots.
Well, can I
do your research?
Something? Yeah. Remember the Gaza demonstrations on the college campuses? Yeah. They were chanting a very famous chant, from the river to the sea.
Yeah.
Somebody asked them, from what river?
Yeah, what river?
What sea?
What does that mean?
They don't know.
They
had no idea. They just replicated what somebody else said.
Yeah.
And a lot of the protesters on what's considered a lot of prestigious campuses, like
Yale,
Columbia,
Harvard,
and the ones on the West Coast, I just thought, how uninformed. And these are supposed to be some of our elite college educated.
Absolutely.
And they didn't come across very good to me.
Yeah.
And I'm an older generation, and I like free speech, and I don't mind protests and all of it. But
it's the social culture, peer pressure that's getting them out there.
Okay. So where are we going in? How do you think your generation is going to do? You know the two candidates are. We don't know all the issues, but obviously a lot of people in your generation, social issues are very important. Obviously, I would think the debt might be important. Now, maybe I'm being biased, but if a guy like me tells you're 35 trillion in debt to start, I might want to know if you have a plan.
Well, we don't have, our generation hasn't seen the consequences of having massive debt. So it's not a huge issue.
Well, but they do see my brother is still in the basement. My other brother's still in the basement and he's engaged, but they can't get married because he can't afford a house. I mean, some of them did see that.
Sure, but how does that relate to the national debt?
Yeah, well, that's true.
If there's not a clear correlation, it's just not an influence. I mean, they're more worried about how much they're paying for gas. They're more worried about getting a Prius. They're more worried about getting a Tesla. Like they're more worried about saving day-to-day money than it is like long-term, like Social Security issues. And
but they do ask about not so much Social Security, obviously, but the one thing they do talk about is always the global warming, certain issues like that.
And Kamala is
huge.
Extremely radical left. She's really wants the Green New Deal. Sure. She wants to reduce fracking. She wants to reduce nuclear power. She wants to do all these things, and she's extremely far left. And if she wants to do those things, and people want those things, she's a great candidate for those people. But the long-term effects are what prevent me from wanting to go that direction. But I think it's an idealistic way to think, and it would be cool if it actually worked. But
do you think it's weird? This just popped into my head. A week or two ago, we were showing pictures of feeble, President Biden and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Within just 2 weeks, we
Trump
flipped
is now
it totally. Trump is now the feeble one, repeating himself. Not really good with the truth. I think that's been well documented. Fact checking of him leads to a blowout in the machine. But he stumbles on himself and does that. In other words, he's become kind of a newer version of Biden.
Yeah.
And then Kamala Harris now represents the vigorous young, the new.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's wild.
It is wild.
Yeah. And then where do you go from here?
But you do have J.D. Vance, which is 40 years old compared to what Kamala is. I think she's like in her 60s or late 50s.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I'm like a lot of people. I don't think we really know her. Most vice presidents, in the
she doesn't have much of a track record from what I've seen.
They don't. Yeah.
So, but yeah, I don't know. It's a very good point. I think she's really going to use it in her campaign. First, president under 80. I mean, I think it's a good line, and people want that.
Yeah. Well, let me see before we hit the end, because there's something I want to ask you. So, how do you feel about the future? I mean, I guess in a way we kind of set it up in a bad way. I mean, we're saying the church has got issues. We're saying your generation's got issues. You're inheriting a massive debt. Let's see, being a man is not being a man anymore.
Sure.
I mean, dating's hard. Suicide, depression, anxiety.
Yeah.
So I'm Isaac Hite. I don't know, how old are you?
I'm 25.
I'm 25. I'm living in America. Is this the dream?
Yeah. I think that whenever there's disruption in the economy, there's opportunity.
Oh, okay.
So, with the way AI is going right now, and with baby boomers getting out of businesses, and I think there's a lot of
dying,
and passing away, and a lot of their assets are getting liquidated for a good price.
Oh, yes.
Whatever it is, I think that there's a lot of opportunities still out there, and that's why I have hope. Okay. And I also think that being able to have good communication skills is a dying skill.
Oh.
And if you can have great communication skills, it will set you apart.
Absolutely.
And I think that's, in relational things, is what I think is maybe one of the most important parts of business. And if you can just be better than your competition, which I feel like I'm a lot better than a lot of my competition that are my age. A lot of my friends, they just want to play video games or just, hang out or do whatever. So I feel pretty confident in a lot of opportunity with that. But yeah, the future is bright, but it's a little bit dimmer than it was 30 years ago.
I was going to say, because there's a lot of, we're going to know so much more within the next 3 or 4 months.
Yeah.
At least what the kind of pulse is of
Sure.
Gen Z because of the election, because it'll give people a track record to model from. Now, obviously, that changes over time as you get older. A lot of people say you become more conservative. You're younger. You're much more liberal, open-minded as far as that goes. So at the end of the day, that's all going to shake out. But it really is different. I've never experienced anything like this. But one thing you just said, I want to, before we end on, when Monica, you know her, when she went to MTSU and Chad went to MTSU, they were forced to take a course because they were business accounting majors.
Okay.
And it was called the Dale Carnegie course.
Yes.
And I started looking into it, and because I thought maybe Vol State could incorporate something like that. And the number one fear is always public speaking, but they were just talking about how businesses are so disappointed in our college graduates. They can't walk into a room with different generational groups in the room and communicate, assess it,
relate,
promote ideas, contribute to the whole.
Yeah.
And they just are shocked at the inability to do that.
Yeah.
And so they require that. And Monica, which you know, is not the most outgoing. She said it was the best class she had of her whole college experience.
Yeah. When I read the book, it was extremely eye-opening.
Thing. So
yeah, his book, How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Yeah.
It changed my life. I mean, it's a really good book. It really puts things in perspective for you.
Wow.
Just to do a little quick plug here, if you don't mind, standupdude.com and standupdude.com.
Okay.
And that they're doing a lot of digital evangelism. We talked a little bit about that. And teaching men, young men specifically, how to be masculine, how to, and knowing that masculinity falls under Christ. And if you want to be an actual masculine guy, you need to be under Christ. So anyway, but kind of going back to that as well. But yeah, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I'm glad we finally.
You got to leave us on a good note. We always have to have a good note.
Okay.
So tell me something good on the way out that I can feel positive about my future.
I feel like I guess just basics. I feel like I'm probably the closest to the Lord I've ever been in my life, which is good. It feels like it's getting easier with age almost.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, I feel like there's multiple opportunities. I feel like I'm trying to follow the Lord and the Holy Spirit on a lot of things. And doors have been opening, doors have been closing, but things are being consistent with income and things like that, and being the possibility of me being able to work for myself full time is becoming more of a possibility every day. So there's a lot of I'm really excited about that.
All right. Well, that's it for today. We appreciate having Isaac Hite give us a positive perspective or an honest perspective. So God bless you, and look for us and share it with other people. And by the way, college is getting ready to crank up here in about 3 or 4 weeks, so we're going to be looking for a lot of volunteers. So if you're interested in it, just reach out to me at David Fuqua. I'm over in the Pickle Building, easy to find. So and God bless you and have a happy day. And
if you want to be on the podcast, reach out too.
Yes,
right?
If you want to be on the podcast, reach out too. So anyway, God bless you and have a good day.